Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if.
Chapter 19. Forecast. Brainstorm. The scythe spun lazily over Hedon's head, each arc extending as the man let out handful after handful of cable. So, I gotta admit, he said, I'm not expecting much out of this, but if you keep me entertained, I might not just kill your blonde-haired friend there right away. How about that as thanks for the arm, huh? Oh, you smug piece of shit, growled Sanji, already being tended to by Chopper, just give me 1 second. Not waiting, Luffy charged, ducking under the spinning scythe to Hidan in the chest. The rib-cracking strike sent the man flying backward through the air several dozen feet, but the man somehow managed to keep his balance as he flew backwards, letting the cable out until he had landed once again. It appeared that Luffy's punch had only succeeded in giving the regenerator some room to work with. Not to be deterred, Luffy immediately began closing the distance once more. Still smiling, Hidan whipped the scythe around in a curving trajectory that met the rubber man halfway. With ease, Luffy leapt off the ground, this time catapulting above it. The attack missed. Then the blade seemed to speed up, completing its next rotation twice as quickly as before. Before Luffy could even reach the height of his jump, Hidan wrenched the weapon upwards directly on course for the airborne man. With a cry of alarm, Luffy tucked himself in, barely vaulting over the attack and then slamming both fists into the flat of the blade as he passed. This time he flew higher and higher, at least 50 feet up. Hidan hauled in the cable, the scythe spinning rapidly inward. Hey, you lot, the man shouted, looking to the rest of them, you just gonna watch. Your friend can't change direction in air. He's gonna get sliced to pieces when he. Gomu Gomu spear. Hidan's words were interrupted when Luffy shot both of his legs down in a stamping kick. It struck the man dead on, slamming him violently into the ground and sending spiderweb cracks in all directions. Suddenly uncontrolled, the scythe sliced apart several small boulders before it buried itself in the ground. Sanji, who was just about done being bandaged by Chopper, muttered, yeah, like we didn't all see that coming, you shitty zombie. Then, he shouted, hey Luffy. Hit him again for me, will you? Luffy landed with sure footing beside the impact crater, a small cloud of dust obscuring the ground. Hidan was plastered face first into the dirt, his back bent awkwardly by the blow. Luffy prodded the body with one foot. Hey, you okay? Wait, you're not even. Luffy interrupted his own words, twisting around before he even knew what had happened. At that moment, the body disappeared, revealing a boulder in its place, and the real Hidan lunged from the ground behind him. In his grip, he held a small handheld spear and he thrust it straight for Luffy's heart. Luffy leapt backwards hoping to dodge the deadly strike, when two feminine arms sprouted from Hidan's side and pulled, throwing his aim off course. Several hundred feet away, Robin stood with her arms crossed over her chest, watching him carefully. Taking advantage of the opening, Luffy launched off the rocky ground and struck Hidan in the chest with a spinning punch. Gomu Gomu rifle. Hidan flew backwards, spiraling through the air. Seeing his chance, Sanji dashed forward, intercepting the flying ninja with a stabbing kick that shot the man back into the air like an artillery shell. Poitrine shoot. Arcing through the sky, Hidan tumbled toward the golden bell, then turned his wild aerial spin into something controlled. His scythe's cable was suddenly pulled taut and it began to circle him vertically. He was 100 feet up and each spin of the scythe nearly touched the ground in a different place. It seemed uneven, uncontrolled, but strangely beautiful. Then, the scythe struck at Sanji, moving almost too fast to follow. The cook was ready for it this time, dodging with no room to spare. Next, it spun around at Luffy, slicing a gouge out of the earth where he had been standing. Twice more it struck, and both attacks were barely avoided. Turning his spin into a graceful landing, Hidan kept the momentum of the scythe going, the widening vertical slashes transforming into a horizontal sweep with a monumental heave. The cable let out, and it arced across the landscape like the knife of a vengeful god. Ready to dodge, Sanji and Luffy realized too late that it had changed course for Robin. She was unperturbed, still staring impassively back at her opponent. With musical chiming, several pairs of Robin's arms sprouted from the wire controlling the scythe, each arm just a couple of feet away from the next. In a sequence, Each pair reached out and clasped hands with its partner, then pulled against each other, dragging the rope up and off course. The attack missed by a wide margin. Still, Robin watched him. If Hidan looked shocked by that display, it was nothing compared to how he looked when a similar pair of legs shot out of both of his ankles, kicking him off balance, and he fell to the dirt. Pulled by the momentum of his own spinning scythe, he tumbled across the rocks, all of the extra limbs disappearing as he rolled. Quickly leaping back into the air, he landed some distance away on one corner of the golden belfry. The Akatsuki warrior looked pissed. Okay, seriously, what the fuck is going on here? He growled, spitting out a bit of dirt and his own blood to the ground below him. I'm no stranger to weird jutsu, but no one felt like mentioning I was attacking the freaky motherfucker's anonymous meeting or something. Rather than speak, Luffy cracked his knuckles. Robin continued watching carefully. That technique you performed, she said, switching out with the boulder after you were hit. You would be a ninja, then. One of the Akatsuki. Hidan turned and gave her an odd look. The fuck? How the hell do you know who we are? Pretty sure I'd remember some freak-ass arm which if I saw you before. That was you doing that, right? 'Cause if so, you just moved up to target number 1. I gotta make sure so I know who to torture slowly. Robin said nothing. Each of the straw hats were spread out around the regenerator at long range. Luffy watched, ready to attack at a moment's notice. Nami had retrieved her Kleem attack and had begun generating a cloud using the staff's atmospheric manipulation abilities, watching the fight nervously as she did so. Chopper stood in his brute form, desperately hoping he wouldn't have to try dodging one of those scythe strikes. As the foul-mouthed man spoke, Sanji stepped up. Oh, you wanna try saying that one more time, you piece of trash. It's bad enough trying to attack a lady, but threatening her like that is absolutely unforgivable. Off to the side, Chopper's eyes widened. It's worse. Really? Don't listen to him, Chopper, said Nami. With a manly cry, Sanji leapt into action, rushing in alone to engage the regenerator at close range. As he did so, Hidan made a strange twisting motion with his scythe and separated the lowest, smallest blade of the weapon, leaving him with his cord-tethered double blade and a much smaller handheld kama. This done, Hidan dodged back behind the bell before Sanji had covered even half the distance between them. Lady, I'll bet you're the type that needs line of sight to aim those arms of yours, aren't you? He shouted to Robin, disappearing behind the bell's golden curves. A moment and a few musical tones later, fuck. You can make eyes, too. This was followed by a hollow bong noise and the bell shook slightly. Mr. Cook, shouted Robin, please get him away from the bell, if you can. Even ruined like this, it is an important artifact. Anything you say. Taking advantage of the distraction, Sanji attacked, delivering a boulder-shattering kick that sent Hidan smashing to the ground beside the bell like a meteorite. As Hidan recovered from the impact, Sanji leapt down after him to deliver a vicious spinning kick, which Hidan blocked with the haft of his double blade, and then moved to counterattack with his kama. This time Hidan was ready for Robin's attempt on his freedom. Just as the limbs started to unfold from his body, he abandoned his attack, twisting himself over with the kind of flexibility only constant regeneration can give, and biting down hard on the offending arm until he drew blood. Back on the other side of the bell, Robin winced as her phantom limb exploded into a small shower of flower petals. Without any defense from Sanji's strikes, Hidan took the bone-cracking kick undefended, but the man just laughed as he swung his large scythe back around to knock Sanji away with the wide flat side of the weapon. He licked his blood-stained lips. All right, I didn't think that'd work. Let's call it a miracle from the Lord. Serves you right, bitch. Hidan spun in a circle, letting out a long trail of the metal scythe's cabling, then whipping it up into the air. With a crack it snapped out, smacking Sanji aside as if he'd been kicked away. Hidan was now free and unhampered. Bringing both scythes down to dig into the dirt, he spun repeatedly, using the blades themselves to kick up a cloud that completely obscured the vision of everyone watching. Sanji cursed. Luffy and the others started moving into better positions, but as the cloud settled it seemed as though Hidan was content to stay inside the dust for now. Unable to see her target, Robin continued to watch carefully from an extreme distance. When the dust finally settled, something had changed. Hidan looked different. His body was covered with patterns of pure black and pure white. Still naked from the waist up, it looked as though he had painted himself with a stylistic representation of a skeleton. Even his face was covered with a depiction of a grim, jawless skull. He had dropped the massive double-bladed scythe and now held only the smaller kama. You think you can try shutting me down and just get away with it, bitch? He shouted, a high-pitched snarl of madness entering his words. A heathen like you deserves to die judged by the fires of Lord Jashan, but this time he has allowed me to be his arbiter. Seeing an opening, Luffy advanced. He had been looking for a good opportunity to get a hit in for a while, and now he brought one arm back. As the mad Akatsuki regenerator laughed, Luffy threw a punch 100 feet long, striking him in the side. There was a crunch as one of Hidan's ribs cracked again, and Robin cried out and fell to the ground. Her hands went to her side before she realized what was happening. It felt like she'd been shot with a pistol, but she saw that there was no damage to her clothes. The rest of the Straw Hats whirled toward her, shouting to see if she was okay. Even as shocked as she was, she made the connection. He had done this to her, somehow. There wasn't really any other explanation. It had happened at exactly the same time. Breathing heavily, she looked up, fixing the Akatsuki member with her gaze. In the background, the sounds of rapid-fire explosions were clearly audible from back towards the ship. Hidan sneered, his skull face warped from the effort. That's right. I love this part. All of you standing around wondering what the fuck just happened. She's a much better target than Blondie over there. You all look like you care what happens to her, don't you? Why don't you just try and kick my ass, huh? He raised the small scythe to his own shoulder. Or maybe I should help you. No, cried Robin. 8 different arms sprouted from Hidan's limbs and back, placing him in a thorough submission hold. Bent backwards, he started to laugh. Then, slowly fighting against his almost total lack of leverage with a titanic strength, he began to unbend, Robin's arms straining to hold him back. Sorry, lady, he said, but you'll need a lot more than that to keep me pinned down for real. Gasping with effort, Robin called out for help. He's linked his body to mine somehow. When he takes a wound, it hurts me in return. Luffy, you hurt her, shouted Sanji. I didn't mean to. Robin, I'm sorry. He heals. She cried out. He'll gladly wound himself to hurt me. Chopper watched in horror as she fought the man's grip on his scythe. What could he do about this? He had hung back so far away from the fight that he wasn't even nearby. Could he even help? He had to try something, or Robin would. She'd. Luffy ran straight at man, still too far away to do anything other than punch him. Shit, cursed Sanji, the hell are we supposed to do to stop something like this? Hey, isn't this the part where you start monologuing and telling us your weak points, or something? Weak points, thought Chopper. I can help with that, can't I? Hidan just laughed, then drew the scythe slowly across his shoulder. Fighting him every step of the way, Robin gasped in pain as blood began to stain her clothing. Galvanized into action, Chopper reached into a side pocket of his pack and pulled out a small yellow ball between his 2 opposable hooves. Without further thought, he broke it between his teeth. Rumble. The rumble ball was his unique creation. A medicine that disrupted his zone-type fruit's morphic field and allowed him to transform freely outside the normal limits of his original 3 types of animal-human hybrid. Through practice, he had discovered several additional forms. The rumble ball came with certain limitations, most notably that he wouldn't be able to use it again for the next several hours, but for the next 3 minutes he would have access to the full potential of his devil fruit. But his was no ordinary fruit. Where a normal zone type focused on enhancing a human's physical traits, he was not a human. As a reindeer who had eaten the human fruit, his greatest gains had been in the creation of an unparalleled mind that had enabled him to become a fully trained doctor at such a young age. Now, he focused that to its limits. Brain point. Raising his hooves, he focused in on his target. His processing capabilities began ramping up as his thoughts sharpened. His opponent's technique had a weakness, and his actions would make it clear. Chopper just had to trust in his new family to buy some time. Technique creates a link between 2 people. Certain limitations or requirements exist. Last words before he revealed this ability were, "I didn't think that'd work." That represents the point that he succeeded in fulfilling those requirements. Chopper whimpered a bit as Robin lost a grip on the man's arm, and the tip of the scythe cut once more into the flesh of her side. He had to focus. He couldn't waste time worrying. He focuses on the religious symbolism of the technique. From his glee, he sees this as a ritual. Delusional, perhaps, but he appears to believe in its significance. Then, Luffy arrived. Hidan watched him, grinning in a way only a person filled with confidence in their own invincibility can. His cruel smile changed into open-mouthed disbelief as Luffy jumped spread eagle straight at him, stretching out all four limbs as he flew. Looking like the angry half of an octopus, Luffy struck the man, arms and legs wrapping bonelessly around his body. Off in the distance, Robin collapsed from the effort of holding the scythes back, and now Hidan fought with Luffy's full body submission hold. He stumbled backward several steps from the impact. He had a condition to fulfill before activating the ritual. The last interaction he had with Robin was biting her hand. Physical contact. No, he touched her hands earlier in the fight. Blood. He cut Sanji earlier in the fight, but didn't transform. He indicated that Sanji could have been an appropriate target as well at the moment he drew his blood. He licked his lips. Consume the blood of an opponent. Highest probability. Ah, balls. Get off me, you stretchy freak. Hidan said, straining against his bonds. Taking a few steps forward, he returned to his original position, then squirmed and fought until he had a few inches of freedom to move. Twisting his wrist backward, he struck, bringing the scythe's blade around to stab into Luffy's side. Gah, damn it, I won't let you hurt Robin, shouted Luffy. The strikes were shallow, Hidan having almost no freedom to move, but he struck again and again, stabbing into Luffy all along his side. Luffy shouted his rage and pain right into his opponent's grimacing face. The blood isn't important right now. He stepped forward when Luffy pushed him back. Was he about to lose balance? No. Chopper adjusted his gaze downward. There. At his feet was a series of marks and circles that looked like they had been drawn in blood. Judging by the amount used, it would have had to have been his own. Luffy's attack had pushed him nearly to the edge, but the man had walked right back to its center. Weak point identified. Luffy. Sanji. Chopper shouted. He's standing in a blood circle. Get him out of it and the effect should end. Ah. You Tanuki motherfucker, cursed Hidan. Sanji didn't say anything, he just charged, bullrushing the both of them out of the circle until Luffy and Hidan tumbled across the ground. The black and white patterned man squirmed to get free from Luffy, slowly forcing himself back onto his feet, but doing very little to dislodge his hanger-on. Okay. Now you're really pissing me off, Hidan grunted, pushing himself step by step back towards the circle. He's not going back to normal. Sanji shouted, sounding deeply worried. What was wrong? The technique hadn't ended. He is returning to the site of the circle. Chopper hurried to share his thoughts. Don't let him get back to the circle. I think you can hit him again now. Shit, you sure about that? No, I don't know for sure. Hell if I'm gonna hit him if we aren't sure. Maybe breaking the circle would help. You sure about that? No, I don't know. Cursing, Sanji dashed to the circle and broke the ground it was inscribed upon with a smashing heel strike. In moments, Hidan's disturbing skin coloration had begun to fade away. Oh, that is it, said the psychopath, slowly grabbing another one of his extending hand spears from the remains of his robe. You guys are so dead. Sensing an imminent attack, Luffy disconnected, unwrapping himself from the man. With a growl, Hidan stabbed out, narrowly missing, and then kicked, sending Luffy flying. Still, Robin was safe. Chopper wanted to cry out with relief, but something was bugging him. Remaining assets. Sanji's blood on the largest scythe blade. Luffy's blood on the smallest. Everyone, shouted Chopper, he's still got Sanji and Luffy's blood. We have to get that away from him. Nami, who had so far remained out of the fight, suddenly reacted to this statement. I think I can do something about that. Adjusting her klima-tacked staff with hurried motions, she glanced up to the dark cloud she had created that was now covering much of the opening to the crater. As she did so, Sanji and Luffy resumed the offensive, driving multiple hits home to occupy the regenerator. The melee was fierce and furious, neither side willing to give ground. Arranging her three-part staff into a triangle-shaped formation, she spun in place and hurled it up into the heart of the cloud. Thunderstorm tempo. A bolt of lightning speared down from the sky, arcing straight to the best conductor around, the golden bell. The sight was spectacular in the gloom. Then, rain began to fall. It poured in torrents from the unnaturally dense cloud, soaking the battlefield, their clothing, and Hedon's discarded weaponry in particular. In moments, the muddy blood was unusable. Hedon just shook his head, water pouring down his skin and washing away all the accumulated grime. All of a sudden he seemed much calmer than he had been before. Man, you guys just have to make this harder on yourselves, don't you? Speak for yourself, said Sanji, pointing at the regenerator with threatening disdain. We've got your number now. We've been pretty much kicking your ass this whole time. Hedon grinned. Really? I mean, if you want to look at it like that, then go ahead. But the way I see it, you're wounded. Tentacle boy over here is bleeding pretty badly, the arm which is just about out of this fight, and I'm still in perfect health. You really want to keep this up? Sure enough, now that the blood was gone, Hedon was showing no signs of injury. He looked just as healthy and hale as he had at the start of it all. Nami was the first to call it. Everyone. Robin needs help. We need to get her back to the ship. Hedon laughed, and began to charge, only to be interrupted by another pair of legs sprouting from his ankles. This time he was ready for it, turning his face first sprawl into the start of an acrobatic handspring. Nice try, bitch, but it's not gonna wah. Hedon's smug words were interrupted when Luffy's outstretched arms suddenly grasped onto both of his ankles. Caught mid-leap, Hedon was suspended horizontally for just a moment before the straw-hatted man began to pull him around. Understanding came to him in an instant. Oh, balls deep, said Hedon. Roaring, Luffy began to spin, whirling the man in a circle. Faster and faster he spun, rubber limbs stretching further and further out on each revolution. Gomu Gomu pinwheel. This didn't please Hedon. Finally, Chopper saw an opening. Luffy. Throw him at the bell. With a rising scream, Luffy let Hedon loose like a rock leaving a sling. The ringing impact resonated throughout the crater. Wounded and broken, at least for a moment, Hedon began to slide down the side. Then, lightning struck. Flesh scorching, electricity arcing through his nerves, the regenerator found his muscles clenching against his will, his supernaturally strong fingers digging into the warm gold. When the shocks finally stopped, Hedon fell to the ground in a smoking heap. In seconds he was on his feet again, then he collapsed as his abused nerves continued to randomly fire. Nami was ready with her orders. We're getting out of here. Chopper, grab Robin. Luffy and Sanji, come here and bring these bags back to the ship. What's in the bags? Asked Sanji, already moving. Nami's grin was as sudden as it was unexpected. All she said was one word. Gold. Chopper had barely half a minute remaining on his rumble ball, and he decided to make it work as best he could. Transforming into a high-speed running form he dashed to Robin, then shifted to his jumping point. As soon as she had a firm grip on his back, he was into the air and out of the crater. Leaving the rogue regenerator behind, the Straw Hats made quick progress back toward the ship. Then they heard the sound of a warning gunshot pass over their heads. Behind them, Marines were pouring out of the tree line near the crater. Chapter 20. Bombs fall, everyone dies. Island of Jaya. Sky. 15 minutes earlier. Deidara had been circling down to the ground for quite some time now, but the monotony really didn't bother him. It was certainly much better than the alternative he had just avoided. He tried not to let it be known, but he had a serious problem with lightning. Not that he was afraid of it, or anything like that, it was for entirely practical reasons. His fighting technique had developed to revolve entirely around the use of chakra-infused explosive clay, and that clay was fundamentally earth element in its nature. Because of this, all of his creations and bombs had an unfortunate tendency to malfunction when exposed to lightning element chakra. So anyway, after Sky High Thunderboy up in Fairyland decided to start taking offense to their presence, Deidara had been the first to volunteer to go down after the stone tablet that had been blasted off the clouds and down to the earth below. Granted, Toby hadn't asked for volunteers, he'd just grabbed Hedon and lobbed him off a cloud, and maybe if Deidara had been just a few seconds faster to speak up then that wouldn't have happened, but, Hey, why take all the joy out of life? Regardless, no way was he going to hang around while some power crazy, thunder god, was going on a bender like that. Seriously, he'd seen the Raikage throne and jutsu around, and even the greatest lightning user in the ninja world had nothing on this guy. It was ridiculous. The man had drilled a hole through something like 50 feet of stone and dirt like it hadn't even bothered him. Add on to that teleportation, a perfect defense, some sort of precognition, a seemingly unlimited chakra reserve, limited omniscience for miles around. Deidara gave a silent salute to the other members of Akatsuki still fighting up above. Have fun up there, assholes. Have yourself a grand old time. The massive clay bird continued its circling descent. Luckily, his clay, when infused with his chakra, could be made to expand without gaining mass, and the unbelievably large avian form he had created from that clay weighed even less than he did. With his long blonde hair kept back by the wind, Deidara focused the scope mounted over his left eye and began to hunt for his target. There was a wonky-looking island far below him. Zoom. Zoom. There was a crater and a glint of gold. He grinned. The bell had landed on an island, which certainly made his job easier. He was still pretty far up, but if he strained the magnification and steadied himself, he could almost make out. Squawk. Holy hellfire. He shouted, scrambling backward in shock. Some sort of fat seagull had snuck up on him and was now flying alongside. What the hell was it doing here? It was strange enough that a bird like this would approach him at all, but what was stranger still was the fact that it was wearing some sort of hat and a full carrying bag was slung over its back. Deidara stared at the bird in confusion, but when no attack seemed imminent, he recalled a few of the explosive jumping bugs that had crawled around from his mount's stomach. Squawk. The bird reiterated. What the hell do you want, Squawk. It leaned in closer and opened its large beak, making an odd sort of dipping motion with its head and waving a wing in his direction. Deidara had always had a sort of affinity for birds, but this was a little ridiculous. I don't. What the hell is that supposed to mean, birdbrain? Squawk. It clarified. Aw man, I really don't understand this place. It just gets weirder and weirder, What? Do you want some food or something? Is that it? Squawk. It agreed. Okay, hang on a second. Deidara reached into a pouch beneath his robes and pulled out one of the spare fish dumplings they had been experimenting with as rations. Bemusedly, he weighed it in one hand and then tossed it over to the hungry bird, who snatched it out of the air with a snap of its beak, devouring it in moments. Squawk. It thanked him. Yeah, alright, sounds good. Goodbye. Get out of here, Squawk. It insisted. Deidara watched with fascination as, with an astonishingly dexterous twist of its wing, it reached into the pouch on its back and retrieved a rolled-up fold of paper, all the while wobbling wildly from the wing adjustments. It reached out and proffered the paper to him. Unable to help himself, he took it. What in the world? This is some kind of newspaper. You deliver newspapers. Squawk. It said, and bade him farewell by raising its hat to him with one wing. Then it was off. Deidara just sat and took that in for a while. Was it possible that the elemental kingdoms were the only sane place in the entire world? That was concerning. Eventually, he stuffed the newspaper into a pouch and shook his head to clear it. Right now he had a job to do. He was descending lower and lower now, and he could finally start making out details of the ground below. The bell had made a huge crater, and it had some natives investigating it. Oh, there was Hidan. Good to know he wouldn't have to go hunting for body parts in the ocean again. Idly, Deidara scanned the surrounding landscape. A few more natives scattered about here and there, some ships, and, wait, zoom. Zoom. Oh my. What a coincidence. I spy, with my little eye, 2 Konoha headbands. And their owners are just sitting around without a care in the world, Oh, you little rodents, are you following us? This was exciting. He hadn't had a chance to go crazy in a while, and the only other Akatsuki member around was already occupied. With one hand he reached into his pouch of specially prepared clay, feeling the biological creation that inhabited his arm open its mouth and begin to feed. As it chewed the white clay, Deidara infused it with his chakra. In mere moments it had formed into a myriad of tiny, bird-like creatures. It looked like Hidan was just sitting around talking to his group of miscreants, but why should Deidara waste a perfectly good surprise attack? Increasing his speed, he let a few of his creations soar away into the wide blue sky. Let's see how they appreciate art. Chopper had been gone for more than 10 minutes when Usopp spotted something unusual. The cowardly sniper had been glaring suspiciously at the thick clouds for nearly that entire time, half expecting a giant golden gong or pair of cymbals to hurtle down after the bell. As he watched, the birds of the island were finally starting to settle back in after the immense impact that had startled them. Though, he could swear that big white bird hadn't been there at all just a little while ago. It was circling around and around like it was looking for something. Kind of an oddly shaped bird, come to think of it. Curiosity piqued, he grabbed his goggles, lowering them and adjusting his homemade zoom. Screw you, Sasuke. Yeah, there isn't anything your magic eyeballs can do that can't be reproduced by a little good old-fashioned human ingenuity, and he had that in bucket loads. So what if he wasn't a ninja? With a little work, Usopp was sure he could walk on water or breathe fire, too. He just hadn't needed to yet. Yeah, carefully he zoomed in on his target. Then he fiddled with the focus. Then he pulled off his goggles and rubbed his eyes. Then he replaced his goggles and looked again. Then he removed his goggles completely and glared with just his Mark I eyeballs, which were pretty darn good all things considered. Subduing his pride for a moment, he wandered over to where the two ninjas were chatting by the side of the house. Hey, you two, what does that look like up there? Wah, asked Naruto, peering up into the sky, the clouds. That's, said Sasuke. That looks to me like a guy riding on top of some sort of dumpy-looking lizard bird thing. Where did he come from? That's just it. I think he came out of the clouds. The clouds? Asked Naruto again. You think he came looking for the guy that fell down here? Or the bell? Wait, muttered Sasuke. No, that's an Akatsuki robe. Eh, cried the sniper, it's them. Shit, we need to get out of here. Quick, go warn the others. I'll get the Mary ready. Beside them, Zoro yawned. Then, he adjusted his position and continued sleeping. He's dropped something, said Sasuke. Something's coming this way. Take cover. Anyone who's seen a bird in flight, such as, for example, everyone, can attest to how quickly a bird can move through the air. They glide and then dive unpredictably, dropping like stones only to let out their wings and leap upward with dozens of quick wingbeats. These bombs moved just like that. One could almost believe that the bomber had simply studied the examples in nature for ages, faithfully replicating them until he had an accurate reproduction of a bird in flight. This is because that is exactly what Deidara had done. None of that mattered to the Straw Hats. They saw the birds coming their way and dashed for the cover of Cricket's stone house. The clay birds arrowed down, exploding on contact with the ground in immense blasts of flame. 2 struck the stone house, and 6 more scattered themselves across the nearby earth, sending Usopp, Naruto, and Sasuke crashing to the dirt. Zoro was tossed off the cliff like a ragdoll. No one present could actually tell whether he had woken up or not. Sasuke recovered first, coming out of his roll with a storm of shuriken. Flying straight up, they were scattered and harmless by the time they reached the bomber, who barely bothered to dodge. The others watched the air carefully, on the lookout for more of the explosive weapons. Soon, the bomber called down from above, his voice faint. Well, if it isn't a couple of Konoha lapdogs caught out in the open. Are you the two that Danzo couldn't handle? I'll have to laugh in his face for that later, The man paused, cackling, then tossed another handful of the small white pellets from his hands. I hope you have fun in my open-air exhibition. Welcome to my gallery. Sasuke cursed, watching as the bombs began their slow, unpredictable descent. He's not going to come down here, is he? We need something to fight him at long range. Naruto, I hope you've been doing something really special for the last year. Won't know unless I try, huh? Naruto took a deep breath. Fuuton. Repu Dan, wind release. Gale bullet. From his mouth he spat a series of compressed air bullets contained by a core of his chakra. They shot up towards the bomber at nearly the speed of sound. The Akatsuki madman weaved and spun, wheeling to get higher so that the bullets would slow down by the time they reached him. Still, only a few caused him any danger. After a moment, Naruto stopped the technique. Shit. I can get him. I know it. Just let me have another shot once we take out those bombs. Suddenly, Sasuke remembered something. He turned to Usopp, who was quite some distance away at this point. Usopp, didn't they say you were a marksman? Usopp looked aghast. What? Whoa, whoa, whoa. He said he's after you too. I'm not getting in the middle of this. What? You really think he's going to leave you out when he's done? Sasuke's cries were interrupted as Mont Blanc Cricket stalked out of his still mostly intact house. He was covered in rock dust and there was a second red lump forming on his bald head. He didn't look pleased. What the hell is this, you louse-ridden cur? You really want to get on my bad side? Grabbing a piece of rubble, Cricket chucked it skyward, his immensely muscled physique trained by years of diving and rock climbing sending the rock after rock up into the air like a trebuchet. They weren't hitting, but they were more things for the bomber to dodge. Then bombs arrived. Almost all of them were aiming directly for Sasuke and Naruto. The two ninjas slipped back to back, Sasuke performing a few quick seals and Naruto clapping both hands together. Raiton. Denko Hoden, Lightning Release. Arc Flash. Fuuton. Reppuusho, Wind Release. Gale Palm. The air above them became a mess. The hemisphere above Naruto filled with lashing blades of wind that tore anything that entered its area apart. Sasuke's half of the sky simply exploded, the air filling with a blinding white light and a release of sound and pressure that threatened to damage all nearby ears. When it all cleared, it became apparent that several of the explosives had hit ground, but none had managed to hurt the two young ninja. With a growl of frustration, Cricket stopped tossing rocks and ran into his house, grabbing a large stick wrapped in red paper. As soon as he was in the open, he tore the wrapping apart with his teeth and pulled down hard on something inside. A flare shot far up into the sky, expanding into a powerful red light that could be seen easily even in the daytime. Hey! Shouted Usopp, still watching from the sidelines, what are you doing? You're gonna call the Marines here. Cricket paused to spit out some of the flare's red packaging. I think they already know something's up after that bell landed. I'm calling my friends for help, cause it looks like we'll need it. Off in the distance, Zoro had finally woken up and climbed back up the cliffside. Taking a stance, he maneuvered one sword into position before slashing the empty air above him. 3-6 Pound Phoenix. Even cutting through nothing but air, the slash sounded like cannon fire. A swirling blade of wind flew up into the sky, but the bomber dodged, narrowly avoiding the unexpected attack. Shit. Missed, said Zoro. Naruto, as the other wind user in the group, stopped looking around for a moment to stare open-mouthed at the swordsman. What the hell, man? I thought you guys didn't use jutsu and chakra out here. What? Responded Zoro. I don't know what you're talking about. Then what the hell was that thing you just did? I figured this thing out like 2 weeks ago. I just cut really hard until the slash energy or whatever starts flying at him like a cannon. As Naruto boggled at the cavalier explanation, Sasuke added his input. Hey, I don't care what you call it, but I can see chakra, and that was definitely chakra. Now, come on and start paying attention. This guy's gonna get the drop on us. Nodding, Naruto made another hand seal. Alright, let's see how you like my attacks this time, you psychotic asshole. With a rapid-fire explosions of smoke, roughly 24 shadow clones popped into existence. All of them began immediately performing identical hand seals. Fuuton. Tajuu Repu Dan, Wind Release, Mass Gale Bullet. With inhaled breaths, the assorted Narutos filled the air with windy death. Here and there, bombs began to explode as they were ripped to pieces from traveling too close to the myriad waves of wind bullets. The small clone army oriented itself to box the bomber in as best as they could, hoping to push him into making a mistake, but after a while it became clear that his attacks weren't doing much good. The man simply had too much time to dodge incoming jutsu, which let him bob and weave unpredictably. All it was doing was occupying his attention. Even for a beast like Naruto, sustaining more than 20 wind jutsu simultaneously was a ridiculous drain on his chakra levels. They'd need something more to take out the flying foe, and they just didn't seem to have it. With the mad bomber distracted, Usopp saw his chance and bolted. Those two ninjas could clearly handle themselves, and he really didn't want to be anywhere near this fight. Dashing towards the ship, he tried his best to outrun the flying creations, but he didn't have much success. As if they were sensing weakness, the nearest one spiraled into a dive, slamming into the ground and erupting in a ball of fire. Usopp went flying head over heels, tumbling into the dirt. Scrabbling to his feet, he continued to run as if his life depended on it. With a look over his shoulder, he saw more of the strange birds now following him. Damn it. Now you start coming after me. He shouted. Can't you tell I don't want to fight you? Just leave me alone. The birds continued to gain on him. Finally, grabbing his slingshot and a handful of ammunition, he fired a pellet. The nearest bird exploded in a gout of flame. Huh, that was easy. The other birds immediately started evading to dodge the unexpected attack, but Usopp began firing as quickly as he could reload. Many more of the tiny bird bombs exploded, blazing a trail of fire as he shot down bombs all the way back toward the bomber himself. Usopp! Shouted Sasuke. Great shots. Take him down and we'll cover for you. Whoa, what? Take him down. He wanted to get away from this as soon as possible. In fact, he was right now wasting valuable time that could instead be spent running. Spinning in place, he ignored the black-haired ninja and continued his earlier retreat. At least, until the bomber shouted threats down after him. That's right, you little worm. He yelled. Run. Run and hide. It's not going to change anything. I'll blast all the dirt off of this rock until I get to you, Usopp spun in place, readying his slingshot in his best attempt at a defiant pose. Well said, Sasuke. Just keep me safe and I, the great Usopp, mightiest sniper in all the land, will handle the air. The effect was somewhat ruined by his knees knocking together. There was laughter from up above followed by another wave of bombs on the wind. Usopp readied his weapon. Beside him, Naruto and Sasuke tried another combination attack that sent two streams of flame and wind shooting up into the sky, engulfing some of the incoming weapons. Usopp saw his chance, grabbing a round of his special ammunition. Hisatsu. Gunpowder Star. He released the shot and it soared true, flying hundreds of feet up to strike the evading bomber dead on. With an explosion that spat acrid, black smoke, the bomber dropped from his mount. The man in the Akatsuki robe fell toward the ground for several seconds before the gigantic white bird swooped down to catch him. Careful, shouted Sasuke. He dropped something else again. Keep your eyes peeled. Soon, the man was back on top of his bird, whirling around to face them. Oh, you cheeky little ant. You wanna try fighting with explosives? He flung out both arms and another wave of the birds scattered in the wind. Have fun. Usopp laughed, filled with a surprising wave of confidence as the bombs flew his way. This time the weapons spiraled from the beginning, each one moving in an unpredictable barrel roll as they arced toward him. More pellets flew from his slingshot, and then the explosions began to fill the air once more. When about half of the flying explosives were left, they suddenly changed directions. Usopp blinked in surprise as his shots missed their mark. It looked like the psychopath had decided to go after the rest of the team after all. Naruto, Sasuke, Cricket, and Zoro readied themselves, but then the bombs changed direction yet again. Half of them made a beeline straight for the Going Merry, and half headed straight for Cricket's house. Let's see which one's important to you, yelled the bomber. With a curse, Usopp adjusted his aim. The bird bombs were flying away from him now, but he could still make the shot. He wouldn't let this screwball hurt the Merry. 1, 2, 3, 4 bombs detonated midair before he heard an odd sound behind him. There was a rustling in the grass. Usopp, shouted Sasuke. Capiche? Capiche? What the hell's that supposed to mean? He looked over his shoulder and saw a small white grasshopper-looking bug of the same style as the other bombs, peeking its head out of the grass. There was only the slightest moment to dodge, and then the world went white. He felt the fire and hit the ground in a heap, blacking out. He wasn't sure how much time had passed before someone shook him awake. Usopp. Usopp. Are you okay? Asked Sasuke. His head was spinning. I'm fine, thanks, how are you today? Usopp responded. You had to be polite, after all. With both hands, Sasuke hauled him back to his feet and shook him to his senses. Everything in his body ached. Are you okay? The ninja repeated. We need you to take him down, Usopp. We can't reach him. The sniper blinked back uncertainly, then he remembered something important. Capiche? Usopp shouted. What the hell was that? What? Sanji said it meant, watch your back. Capiche? Look, I'm sorry, but. There was emotion in the grass behind Sasuke. Capiche? Capiche? The sniper screamed. Ducking out of Sasuke's grip, Usopp made the quickest quick draw he had ever performed in his life, catching the grasshopper creature mid-leap. Another blast of fire shook the air, singeing them both. Shit, cursed Sasuke, whirling in place. Now his eyes were everywhere, searching the grass for more of the hidden bombs. The Straw Hats were in trouble. By staggering his waves of bombs, the Akatsuki member had finally reached full saturation of the area. Each of the people stuck on the ground was forced to see everywhere around them, and wounds were mounting fast. Hemmed in by the hopping insect creations, Naruto, Cricket, and Zoro soon joined Sasuke and Usopp. On the plus side, it meant they had more eyes to watch all sides. On the minus side, it meant that the bomber had finally succeeded in forcing them into one place. Bringing his hands together in the seal of the tiger, Sasuke released a wave of flame from his mouth. Kaden. Hibashiri, fire release, running flames. The fire danced around them as if someone had poured a barrel of oil in a circle 50 feet wide. From there it began to spread outwards. Before long, they were all at the center of a raging inferno. The grasshopper bugs backed off at first, and a few that tried to proceed through the flames were baked before reaching their targets inside. Some, though, were managing to leap over the fire circle intact. Like magic, a fan of shuriken appeared in the ninja's offhand, and he began knocking the incoming bugs out of the air. Zoro, you and I should handle the ground. The rest of you, take the sky. Nodding, the defenders readied their weapons, the light of the flames dancing across their eyes. Usopp readied his slingshot. He didn't want to look at the Mary. He knew he hadn't destroyed all of the bombs that had been heading its way. He could take a hit or two, but by all that was good in this world he hoped his ship was okay. Slowly, Usopp tuned the world out. He became nothing more than an automated reload and aiming function for his slingshot. He fired pellets with no regard for conserving ammunition, destroying every flying bomb he could manage to take out. He would not let them hurt the Mary. The evasion patterns of the bombs grew wilder and wilder as their numbers thinned. Vaguely, he was aware that the others were fighting too. A couple of big toads appeared out of nowhere and started jumping into the air, trying to attack the bomber. Things blew up around him, but he hardly noticed. Finally he had a moment of safety, a chance to take a clear shot at the bomber. He aimed his weapon, and then saw another bomb headed for the Mary. He readjusted and fired, protecting the ship. Something tapped him on the foot. Then it tapped harder. Who was doing that? Sasuke and Zoro were still destroying every bomb that attempted to leap through the fire. Naruto was nearby, looking back and forth for something. Cricket was in front of him, flinging rocks. There was no one left. Shocked out of his daze, Usopp looked down. A small, white burrowing insect was kicking him repeatedly in his shoe. A second later, a couple more burrowed their way from underneath the ground. Usopp had just an instant of shocked realization before the bug looked up at him, a cartoonish smiley face inscribed on its otherwise featureless clay head. Above him, Deidara crowed in triumph. Art is a blast. The last thing Usopp felt before blacking out was Naruto tackling him to the side. Then, the bombs exploded. Chapter 21. Exeunt, pursued by everybody. The world was on fire, and Usopp sat watching it burn. What was going on? His ears were ringing, and he wasn't sure when exactly he had sat up, but he was quite certain that falling over again would be too painful to imagine. His whole body was going to be a bruise if he survived this, and it felt like his legs were broken, but it was just too hard to tell with all the other injuries covering him. Beside him, a burnt and battered Naruto was face first in the dirt. Sasuke was standing over the both of them, tossing shuriken, strengthening the flames, and slicing things out of the air as quickly as he could. The others were there, too. This was a familiar scene, Usopp realized. He congratulated himself for realizing that he had seen it all just a little bit ago. Except, the last time he had seen it this way, he had blown up. Was he going to blow up again? What would help him not blow up again? He needed to get that bomber guy, right? Then the explosions would stop. He reached into his pouch, pulling out a random piece of ammunition. Raising it to his slingshot, he took aim and fired. Shoop crack splat, the bomber screamed in pain, and then he kept screaming. Ah, fuck. What is this? Hot sauce. Goddamn it. My eye. Hey, can't see now, can you? Muttered Usopp, delirious with pain. That's right. That's my Tabasco star. Usopp, shouted Sasuke. Usopp, pay attention. He's got one eye in a goggle. Once he cleans the lens, he'll be able to see. Hit him again, fast. Damn it, couldn't be easy, could it? The bomber was climbing rapidly now, still too blind to dodge, so Usopp took another shot, and this one exploded as it hit the bird's moving wing. One more. Just one more shot and it'd be fine. He'd be fine. No more exploding. Another piece of ammunition to the slingshot. He fired. Shoop crack splat, the bomber screamed again, but it was an entirely different sound this time. Oh, holy hell, what's wrong with you? Gak Blue, he gagged, suddenly fighting to hold down his stomach. Goo, it's in my mouth. Shit. Hey, rotten eggs. Serves you right. That's the power of my egg star, apparently. Gets you coming and going. Then, Usopp passed out. Stinging, nauseous, and in pain, Deidara wished to share his displeasure with the world. You little worm, he shouted, I will destroy you. You and everything you hold dear. I'm coming back around for you know. First I'll blow up your ship. Something was seriously wrong with these people. He hadn't expected the non-ninja fighters to put up anything like a serious fight, but that sharpshooter was ridiculous. His aim was perfect, and when it came to tracking Deidara's birds, it was as if he was literally seeing the future. Still, the bastard was out cold now, and the rest of them had nothing that could stop his bombs. Just as he was thinking that, there was motion from the tree line. Several dozen white and blue uniformed soldiers poured out into the clearing and took aim, each and every one of them with a rifle at the ready. In the elemental kingdoms, guns were a rarity, being inaccurate and inelegant things, but Deidara had at least a passing familiarity with them as weapons of war. Guns just weren't scary to him. They took forever to reload, used inferior explosives, and even a group of them couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Frankie, he doubted they could even reach him up here. With a crack, a bullet whizzed right past his head. What the hell? At the front of the group of soldiers, a man with dark skin and an ornamented jacket pulled out a megaphone. Attention all combatants. This is Captain Sebastian Weber of Vice Admiral Garp's Third Fleet. Lay down your weapons and surrender peacefully, or we will shoot you down. Ah, hell, cursed Deidara. This was annoying. There was a saying. It never rains, but it pours. Captain Sebastian Weber also considered another idiom. One in the hand is worth two in the bush. Right now they had just encountered the Straw Hat Pirates along with the internationally wanted criminal, Nico Robin. What's more, the Straw Hats were wounded and divided by a dangerous group of unknowns. In addition, his brave men and women were holding off a wave of pirate treasure hunters drawn here by the gold. Finally, a poneglyph had just fallen right into their laps. Any other day and any one of these challenges would have been easily handled and earned them a feather in their cap. But there was a problem. Commodore Flounders was quick to put it into words, his voice high-pitched and scratchy. Are they fighting over the gold or the poneglyph, do you think? It's never pretty when two crews start going after the same heist. Sebastian didn't bother looking beside him. He wouldn't see anything. The Commodore was very stealthy when he wanted to be, a fact that had benefited their group, Flounders fishermen, greatly during their former life of crime. My guess would be that Nico Robin has convinced the Straw Hats to fight for the gold so that she can read the forbidden words. She's the only one who can, after all. The other group, that black-cloaked duo, must be after the gold itself. Do you think she had time to decipher the stone? She does appear to be wounded. Who can say? Commodore Flounders made a noise of reserved agreement. Shifted up in tone, it sounded like a long squeak. The Straw Hats are slippery. We must be realistic. Our priority has to be as follows. First, separating Nico Robin from the stone. Second, the capture of Nico Robin. Third, the capture of the Straw Hats. Fourth, the capture of these unknown pirates. I will position myself to ambush the Straw Hats and disable them at sea, so we should focus our efforts here on isolating the stone. Sebastian nodded. It was a sound assessment. He raised the Den Den Mushi and made a connection to the one of their 3 ships that they still had at sea. Captain Saldici, we've had a situation. The Straw Hats will be escaping the island and we aren't likely to catch them. The Commodore will sneak on board and disable their ship, but we need you to be at the westward side of the island and ready to board them once the Commodore is done. Understood and acknowledged, pronounced the rumbling voice on the other end, the snail's face square and surly. Turning to the men and women under his command, Sebastian gave the order. Well, we warned them. Open fire. Didera began dodging wildly, attempting to shield himself from the incoming hail of surprisingly fast and accurate gunfire using the body of his bird. Shit, he cursed. This day just keeps getting better and better, Who the hell brings so many guns to this kind of party? Soaring high out of range until he could survey the entire battlefield, he dove back down like a meteor into the Bell's deep impact crater, unfurling his wings to halt his fall right in front of the poneglyph. With a smooth motion, he made the clay bird creation grab onto the belfry with its wings, pressing its belly into the surface of the stone tablet and rolling back and forth. When it pulled back, the bird's clay underbelly was imprinted with an exact replica of its complex markings. The priorities have changed, said Commodore Flounders, and then there was a rustling in the grass. Flounders was gone. There was no point in trying to follow him with his eyes. Sebastian cursed his luck. It never rains, but it pours, Hey, altar boy. Didera shouted at Hidan, who was retrieving his weapons with sullen menace. If you're planning on coming back up with me, then now's the time. Get the hell on the bird and let's go. Hidan scowled, clearly upset by the results of his fight, but leapt up to the clay creation, grabbing a steady perch before both shinobi rose up into the air. Unnoticed by everyone present, there was a rustling in the grass at the edge of the crater and then a blur of motion that collided with Didara's mount. The bird didn't shake in the slightest from the tiny impact, and continued to rise with no one else the wiser. Right before the 2 Akatsuki members crested the top of the crater, a massive series of explosions detonated across the surrounding landscape, sending Marines ducking and covering to shield themselves from flying debris. By the time the gunfire began again in earnest, the 2 shinobi had ascended almost out of reach. The Straw Hats, meanwhile, were making good on their escape. The Bell group had made it to the stone house without further injury. Usopp, Naruto, and Robin were out of the fight, being carried by Zoro, Sasuke, and Chopper, respectively. Oh, no, cried Chopper as they approached the ship. What happened to the Mary? The Mary was a mess. As everyone boarded the ship, they could finally see the extent of the damage. There was a ragged gash in the side of the hull and a number of burnt holes had been punched in the deck, forcing the crew to put out a few small fires before they could spread further. Luckily, the sails were mostly intact and there was no serious damage below the waterline. They could fix the Mary later. Right now, they had to leave, because the Marines were going to be right on their tail. There was just one problem. Listen to me. Everyone, listen to me. Shouted Nami. If we leave the island before the log pose is set, we'll have to come right back. We've still got a day and a half to go. Cricket cursed until the air was blue. You can't seriously be arguing this now. Look. Pointing off into the ocean, they saw 2 ships. One was a strange ship with some sort of monkey theme. Another one off in the distance around the island was clearly a marine ship. I called for help. That ship's owned by some friends of mine that have an eternal pose set to this island. They're very familiar with dodging the Marines, and they can get us away from here safely if we make it to them, no problem. But that won't matter at all if that Marine ship catches up to us before they get here. I can't be here either. I've got a bounty on my head same as you. Your good luck charms, kids, and I want to see you succeed, but we need to leave now. Come back to set the log pose later. There won't be any later. Said Nami. After word of that Bell spreads, this island will be swarming with pirates and Marines alike. 4 days here will be suicide. As the argument was set to continue, Naruto, still nursing his wounds with Chopper's help, interrupted them with a question. Wait, all you need is to keep that log pose thing on the island for another day and a half, right? Nami nodded, uncertain of where he was going with this. Naruto held out his hand. Don't worry about it. Give that thing to Sasuke and me and we'll hide out here for a while. No way are a couple of badass ninja like us gonna be caught out by some mook soldiers. We'll signal you when it's set. Sasuke turned to Naruto in surprise, then nodded his agreement. Cricket nodded as well, quick to support this plan. It'll work. My friend's eternal pose means we can make it back here anytime. We'll stick with them at sea until you're ready to come back. I hope you like bananas. Sanji, however, seemed uncertain. How the hell are we supposed to know you two won't just take off with the log pose the instant we leave sight of shore, huh? Sasuke shook his head. You've still got our stuff, don't you? Nami, give it to them, said Luffy, still bleeding from a number of wounds. We don't have time to argue. That was the end of it. Naruto grabbed the log pose, and then both of the ninja disappeared in an explosion of smoke. When the smoke cleared, both Naruto and Sasuke were still standing there. Started Chopper, weren't you two going to leave? Shish, hissed Naruto, we're two shadow clones. We're fake. It's just me, Naruto, twice. We're hoping to throw off anyone who might be watching. Come on, we need to get going. The crew muttered something about ninja bullshit, but they listened anyway, moving to set sail. And so the wounded Going Merry sailed off into a retreat. Sebastian considered the situation. When the Commodore had switched targets, they had realistically lost any hope of catching the Straw Hats. Even now, ruffians from the town were starting to approach the area as word of an unclaimed golden treasure reached them. He called immediately for a ceasefire. His soldiers obeyed quickly. That's enough. Let the Commodore handle those two rogues. Secure the area and cordon off that crater. Don't let anyone near that bell. Then, using his portable Den Mushi, he communicated the Commodore's orders back to the one of their 3 ships that was still at sea. Captain Saldici, the Commodores changed targets. Follow the Straw Hats. Sink them if you can, but your priority is to get them away from the island and return here. Away from the island. That's the plan. And we will follow the plan. Captain Weber out. Sebastian disconnected, sighing. The Navy had thought that the only person with the capability to decipher those stones was the wanted fugitive, Nico Robin. Clearly, that had been wishful thinking. No one would recover a clay impression of the stone if they didn't think they could use it. So now they had 2 targets to chase, but little freedom to move. Was Nico Robin the more important target, or the unknown group? Nico Robin tended to jump from group to group, crew to crew, and had enjoyed very limited success convincing others to aid her with her personal quest. This new group of pirates were complete unknowns, as far as he was aware. An unknown and unmonitored group with both the ability and inclination to hunt the poneglyphs was severely frightening. Given Nico Robin's normal patterns, the choice was clear. Having been wounded, she might not even have read the stone, so the Commodore's priority had to be on the new pirate crew. They couldn't let them escape without a single lead for intelligence to work on. Sebastian took a moment to look up toward the black-cloaked duo that was already shrinking from visibility. Hidden in the moving folds of the clay bird, a single gray mouse clung on with grim determination, his ears flapping in the evening wind. Chapter 22. The Mysteries of Chakra. Grand Line. Going Merry. 2 days later. Once the night after next had fallen, it was clear that Naruto and Sasuke's sneaking mission had gone off without a hitch. The 2 young ninjas spent the next day and a half resting and healing while hidden away from the current conflicts centered around the bell. Their log pose set just a little bit later than advertised, and shortly after that, Naruto was alerted to the approach of the Going Merry after one of his clones disincorporated, sending the memories that clone had experienced back to the original Naruto on the island. Even late at night, Sasuke easily spotted the tentatively approaching Merry and signaled them using a simple jutsu designed to produce focused light. The 2 shinobi were retrieved with no trouble at all. Mont Blanc Cricket and his salvagers bid their new acquaintances a fond farewell and left to do some long-term planning about a life that didn't involve golden bells of any kind. The days after this passed fairly quickly, with a lot of work to do repairing the damage done by the Akatsuki bomber as well as the damage to themselves. As time moved on, the crew began hearing strange noises across the ship. Sometimes, when Usopp was hammering, it would sound like 2 people were working instead of 1, or there would be odd pounding noises at unusual times of day. At first, Usopp blamed Naruto and his clones, who had been helping out with the repairs. Then, one morning, a newly healed Usopp woke everyone up to tell them that he had seen a strange figure working with some of his discarded tools at night, but it was soon dismissed as dreams. When all was said and done, the repairs to the ship were completed in excellent time, though the scars of the battle remained quite evident. After the harrowing experience they had shared, Usopp and Naruto fell into a comfortable friendship. Naruto's self-sacrificial dive to push Usopp out of the way of the explosion, as well as keeping his word when they brought back the log pose, did a lot to ease the sniper's earlier mistrust. Strangely enough, it was his shadow clone that had performed a great deal of the initial dialogue between the two of them, so the original Naruto was left with the odd experience of suddenly being aware he had a new friend at the very moment the old shadow clones disappeared. So it was that 4 days after leaving the island, Naruto and Usopp sat together working over a single problem. Nami's Kleem attacked. She really created a thunderstorm with this thing? Asked Naruto, wonder in his eyes. How? It doesn't have anything in it that actually does anything, does it? Having built the device himself, Usopp had to interject on a point of order. Ah, but there are parts that do things in here. Look, here's the heat pump that makes hot and cool air from either end. Here's a water reservoir. This device right here generates static electricity, and then. Yeah, but this is all, you know, really weak, right? No offense, but no seals, or anything to store chakra. How the hell does it work? Well, you see, okay, I'm going to be honest here. I have no idea how she does half of the things she does with this. I mean, I didn't build it to make thunderstorms. Most of this was just for distractions, and then I got a bit carried away and started putting party tricks in there too. Party tricks don't summon lightning bolts, man. Naruto turned to look at the distant navigator. So, how's she doing it? Waving Nami over, the two guys found that she was quite willing to explain her methods. The only problem was their own lack of understanding. Eventually giving into frustration, Nami simplified matters. Basically it boils down to this. Hot and cold air can be used to manipulate air pressure and humidity. With that, you can affect the weather. That's it. Naruto spun the staff in a single, quick motion. From one end came a ball of vaguely warmish air. You really do all of that with just, you know, this. Yes. It's just an extension of what I do as a navigator. I know no one else here seems to feel the weather like I do, but it's very straightforward, alright. Nami crossed her arms and shifted her hips. You can do a lot with just small differences in temperature and electrical charge. Naruto scratched his head. Alright, if you say so. Satisfied, Nami turned to leave. Then, Naruto spoke again. What if you could do more? She stopped. More. Yeah, if you can do that much with just those little farts of hot air, I kinda wonder what you could do with some actual muscle behind it. Whoa, interrupted Usopp. Is this some more ninja bullshit? I guess so, mused Naruto. I mean, I'm not good with devices like you are, Usopp, but if you had access to a bit of elemental chakra then we might be able to beef this thing up. You want to make me shoot wind and lightning? Asked Nami, raw disbelief dripping from her face. No way. I don't believe it. They were interrupted by Sasuke, who had been napping in the corner. Sorry, but I wouldn't get your hopes up too high, Nami. Naruto, you're reliable in a pinch and all, but scholar of chakra you are not. Frankly, you're a bit of a bonehead. Naruto tossed a nearby screw, which bounced harmlessly off of his friend's reclining form. First of all, screw you. Second of all, just watch me. So Sasuke did watch him. First he was amused, then confusion set in. Eventually, it turned into shock. With a smug expression, Naruto grabbed some small folds of paper from his pack. As he slowly drew his finger across one of them it was as if he were drawing a picture in ink, symbols appearing from his careful motions as if by magic. Activating his Sharingan, Sasuke watched the chakra pulse outward through his friend's hand. Jiraiya taught you this? Sasuke asked, fascinated by the display of technical skill from his friend. Kinda. More like he pointed me in the right direction. What's that supposed to mean? Naruto spoke as he continued to work. So, I'm an Uzumaki, right? Apparently the Uzumaki clan used to be really, freakishly good at seals of all sorts. That's where the seal on my chest comes from. Jiraiya had the bright idea of hunting down some of the old Uzumaki techniques, which was pretty hard, he grinned. Apparently I'm a natural at it. Sasuke was stunned. I don't know what to say. You didn't know that until last year. Wow, finding that out must have been. Must have been what? I mean, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like if no one had ever been around to explain why the Sharingan was so important for me, or what it means to be an Uchiha fire user. It's just strange to think about. Naruto was silent, seeming to take that in. Eventually, he finished his work. With one hand placed on the seal, Sasuke watched him transform his chakra into wind-natured energy and pour it into the seal. Alright, it's finished. Nami, Usopp, and Sasuke watched with uncertainty as Naruto placed the paper seal on the deck. The blonde ninja picked up a small craft hammer and sat down beside it. This seal is kinda based off of some of the physically activated varieties you might see in generic traps and stuff, If you give it a tap, like this. Naruto smacked the hammer into the seal, dead center, and a blast of the unusual cutting wind came spraying out of the seal. It expended itself in one violent burst of energy, about 4 or 5 seconds long, then went out. Everyone else's jaws dropped. Naruto grinned, happy at the reaction. Hell yes. See what I mean? That's just the start, too. I can tune it to whatever we want. Usopp examined the seal with great interest. Well, isn't that something? Even if we just stuck with the hammer idea, we could take a few of these on a roll and make a sort of popgun wind cannon, just press a button and kablooey. It's not anywhere near as powerful as what Sasuke and I can do with our jutsu, said Naruto, but I figure if you can make thunderstorms with just hot and cold air, then who knows what you can do with this, right? Nami considered this carefully. That's one hell of an upgrade. I'd sure feel a lot safer with something that could do that in reserve. Can you use this chakra stuff to make the heat, cold, and electricity functions any stronger? Naruto paused for a moment, then looked to Sasuke. Well, I can do it as long as we have the right elements. When the others looked puzzled, Sasuke stepped in. What he means is that we only have so much available to us. Every person has a natural affinity with a specific element of chakra. With some training, some people can get 2 or maybe 3. Any more is impossible for anyone except really legendary figures. Naruto's, obviously, is wind. I can use fire and lightning, and can fake certain other elements weakly if I've watched someone perform them, but can't control them naturally. So we've got heat and electricity covered. Wind, fire, lightning, but you can't do cold. Cold's not really an element, said Naruto. Well, it kinda is, but let's just stick with that, agreed Sasuke. Cold isn't an element we can use, no. Nami looked a bit disappointed. Still staring with fascination between the staff and the experimental seal, Usopp offered his opinion. I don't think that has to be a problem, actually. The limiting factor of the heat pump was power, which is why you have to spin it so fast. If there's a little bit of lightning to work with as power, then I bet I could make something that handles the cold well enough. We'll have to dial down your crazy fire a fair bit to match, though. Usopp was in his element. As he worked, someone else started to express interest. Pardon me, came a voice from the upper deck. Chopper was peeking uncertainly over the side. I've been watching for a little while. When you said, every person has chakra, do you mean just you ninjas? Naruto grinned back at the curious reindeer. Nope, I mean everyone. You too. Really? How can you tell? Well, for example, Naruto poked the top of his head and twirled it in his blonde hair. You can tell what direction your chakra swirls around inside you by looking at the way your hair swirls on your head. And that means. Suddenly, a second grinning Naruto ambushed the reindeer from behind, grabbing his pink hat with both hands. As Chopper screamed and squirmed, Naruto pulled the hat off from around his antlers with a pop. Look at that. If I mess up your fuzz, then your chakra's gonna go all over the place. Ah, stop it. Stop it, you jerk. Chopper squealed, trying desperately to wrest away from Naruto's fuzzing grip. Finally, he transformed, growing nearly 6 feet in a single instant. I said stop it. The Naruto clone was tossed into the air, hitting the lower deck in a heap before exploding into a puff of smoke. Before anyone could say anything, Chopper ran off. There was lots of laughter from the lower deck, Naruto's loudest of all. As Sasuke stopped chuckling, he decided to give the little guy what he wanted. He called out, "To answer your question, Chopper, we have a test we give to people to see what kind of chakra they have. We use a certain type of paper that's made from trees that are fed chakra as they grow up, but I'm sorry to say that we didn't bring any along with us." "Nah, it's okay," said Naruto, tearing bits off of a piece of the paper he had used to write the seals, "'cause all the best paper that's used for sealing is made of the same stuff. And the Uzumaki clan only uses the best." Smiling, Naruto held out a fan of several roughly torn patches of paper. "I'm thinking we should try it out." Naruto's enthusiasm was perhaps a little bit hasty. Chopper was watching them suspiciously from behind one of Nami's tangerine trees and refused to come out, so only Nami and Usopp were nearby, and both of them failed to generate any response. Sasuke assured them that this was normal for anyone that hadn't trained to control their chakra. Still, a bit of searching the ship led them to bring Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy back to the deck. "What is this? What do I do?" asked Luffy, holding the paper in one hand. "Well, you just focus your chakra," started Naruto, before frowning uncertainly. That is, you just concentrate on the paper, and think about the energy I don't know how to explain this to you. Focus on it, and do what seems natural." "Oh, so it's mystery paper. Got it," said Luffy. Luffy stared at the paper for a moment, then gripped it while clenching his teeth and making odd grunting noises. Eventually, he popped the crumpled up paper in his mouth. "What the hell?" asked Naruto. "I don't think your paper works," said Luffy, before wandering off, bored out of his mind. Zoro proved a bit more cooperative. His chaotic-looking chakra, as well as Sanji's, actually reminded Sasuke a bit of an older Chunin in their village named Rock Lee, but it was hard to tell if that was a coincidence or not. After holding the paper and concentrating thoughtfully for a moment, Zoro shook his head. "Don't think so," he said. Sanji laughed. "Yeah, I thought not. If that chakra stuff needs strength of mind as well as just plain strength, then you're screwed." Naruto was undeterred. I dunno. Try imagining like that paper's one of your swords and you're about to swing whoa." In the middle of his sentence, the scrap of paper in Zoro's hand cut in half and fell to the ground. "Nice," shouted Naruto, as Sanji groused, "that means you're wind element, like me." He held up his fist, and Zoro solemnly fist bumped it. "I suppose we kind of guessed that already," said Sasuke, "what with you shooting sword wind blasts and everything." Sanji, "Want to try?" Desperate to show up his rival, Sanji stepped up immediately, grabbing the proffered slip of paper. Focusing with all of his might, the paper was not affected in the slightest. Grumbling and grunting, he pushed harder, before Zoro started to chuckle. "Too much for you, you dumbass cook." Sanji let out a heavy breath, relaxing for a moment. After another try failed to generate a response, he cursed. "Damn it. This chakra stuff. I thought you use it to walk on water, right? Why am I using my hands for this?" Naruto shrugged. "It's just generally the easiest way to do it, you know," he said. "But most ninja can use their feet too, obviously. Only someone like a Hyuga can shoot a lot of chakra out of anywhere else, though." "Well, hell if I'm gonna stick to my hands, then," Sanji grumbled. Slipping out of his reinforced dress shoes, he dropped the slip of paper on the ground. Stepping on it with one bare foot, he laughed as the paper suddenly burst into flames. "Ha! In your face!" he cried out, triumphant. "Okay, so I guess that means I'm fire." "Yeah," said Sasuke, "just like me. I still don't know what you'll be able to do with it, but knowing that is a start." Spoke another voice from the upper deck. Chopper was once again peeking over the side. "If you don't try and grab me again, I'll try it." Naruto grinned. Before long, they coaxed him down. "All right," said Naruto, "you're smart, so I bet you'll understand this. Look deep inside yourself, right inside your fuzzy little belly, and imagine the energy that fills you. Imagine it traveling up through your body and down into your arms. When it gets down to your hands hooves push it out into the paper." As Naruto spoke, Chopper concentrated with every fiber of his being. He could feel what Naruto was saying. It was a little bit like how his body felt when he was using the rumble ball. Now that he tried it, it was like he could move that energy about just by thinking about it. Up into his chest, down his arms, and into the scrap of paper in Chopper's hooves shook gently and sprouted a tiny greenish-white shoot. As he watched, a single leaf popped out from the growth with a cute little POIT sound. Chopper's eyes went wide, and his jaw dropped open. I did it. I made it grow. I made it grow. That's incredible. He laughed and hopped excitedly in place, then turned to the two ninja boys. What does that mean? What am I? Naruto was just frowning and blinking at him. I don't. What? Sasuke looked like he'd just seen a ghost. His jaw was hanging wide open and he had stopped breathing or blinking. Oh no! Cried Chopper. It's bad. Sasuke shook himself, glanced at Naruto, and then shook his head again. No, it's not. It's fine. Just, Naruto, could we have that last piece of paper? Calmly, Sasuke handed the paper to Chopper. Chopper, if you don't mind, I'd like to watch you with my special eyes when you do that. Is that all right? When Chopper had no objections, Sasuke activated his Sharingan, red eyes swirling into place. He could see the path of Chopper's chakra, burning and pulsating inside him. The chakra coils in his abdomen were filling the young reindeer with energy. It looked hungry and excited, like a beast just waking up from a long hibernation. When Chopper made the paper sprout again, Sasuke was certain. Something incredible had just happened. Chopper, you're amazing. Your energy is unbelievable. I hardly ever see anyone with physical energy as strong as yours. You might even have more than, well, Naruto. It's practically inhuman. Chopper wasn't sure whether to blush or frown at the odd compliment. Well, I'm not a human, he said. What? Asked Sasuke, looking up in surprise. I'm not a human. I'm a reindeer. I just ate a devil fruit that made me partly into a human. Sasuke blinked, swallowing down a surprised lump in his throat. I see, I guess that makes sense. I had thought it was the other way around. That means your baseline body is an animal, so of course you'd have the incredible physical energy of a beast. All you'd need is mental energy. Soon, Sasuke started tracing the lines of Chopper's chakra. All of the paths were exquisitely perfect, as if they had been sculpted from an ideal. There was almost no resistance at all. It was surprising he wasn't shooting chakra out of his pores at all times of the day. Sasuke could see tiny trickles of earth chakra and water chakra both flowing through the boy at the same time, but he doubted that any element would be out of the reindeer's reach with proper training. The ability to use wood element ninjutsu had been lost to humanity since the first Hokage had died, but apparently Mother Nature had decided that reindeer needed it more than humans did. Still, there was something weird about it all, beyond even the incredibly perfect chakra system. There was a hint of something else. Soon, he realized what it was. It was as if there was a second source dumping energy directly into Chopper's system at each one of his chakra points. Each of them looked almost like Naruto's seal that drew energy from the Kyuubi, to be honest. The other component of chakra is mental energy, Sasuke mused. If you don't have enough of that, you can't take advantage of your body's natural physical energy. I would have guessed that as an animal your mental energy would be weak, but... Hey, I heard that, shouted Chopper. Chopper, pardon me for a moment. I'd like to take a closer look, but I need to look into your eyes for a little bit to do it. Is that okay? After a moment, Chopper relented, nodding his assent. Over the course of his training, Kakashi had given Sasuke some tips on controlling the chakra of the tailed beasts using the Sharingan. It was a purely theoretical exercise, as Kakashi knew that it was only a possibility if he were to use his brother's Mangekyo Sharingan, which at that time he hadn't had access to. When Itachi had met with Sasuke inside the Tsukuyomi, his brother had been quick to offer Sasuke even more information on that subject, once he had learned that Sasuke was best friends with the Kyuubi's host. According to Itachi and Kakashi both, the Mangekyo Sharingan was known to have some minor ability to suppress and control malicious energies, like Naruto's Kyuubi. That was, in fact, the reason that the village mistrust of the Uchiha had spiked after the Kyuubi had attacked the village all those years ago. He had also been warned that attempting to suppress the Kyuubi in actual combat would be a fatal mistake. It was something to be attempted only if the need was truly dire. He focused his chakra, the Mangekyo Sharingan blossoming in his eye. He wouldn't use the Tsukuyomi. He'd just use Itachi's Mangekyu to make a connection the same way he might start any other ocular genjutsu. If there was something dangerous about these devil fruits, his eye might protect him. Staring into the nervous young reindeer's eyes, his awareness of chopper disappeared. Moving into his chakra system through the brain, it was clear that his mental energy was nearly as well developed as his physical energy. Or perhaps it was more. Potential. He had great potential in both areas, which was highly unusual. Perhaps the devil fruit that had given him a human brain had also given him an idealized system of mental pathways. Sasuke dove deeper and deeper into the well of the boy's energy, finding one of the tiny portals that were generating the mystery chakra and watching it as he grew closer. It really was different from a normal person's, and also different from Naruto's. This wasn't a seal, it was more like a symbiosis. He looked closer and closer, the flow of the chakra changing color in his sight as he stepped inside. A human stood before him, built entirely of green fire. The human's black, empty eyes gazed back at him, filling him with an existential dread. How could something with no eyes even see? It was wrong. The creature's proportions were off, its limbs slightly too long. He could feel its chakra washing over him, and every drop of it was ridden with a deep intelligence that made him feel so unbearably small. It was so old, and this creature knew exactly how young the child that had wandered into its lair really was. It knew everything about him. It knew everything he was, and everything he could ever be. Slowly, it opened its dark, abyssal mouth and began to speak. "Ah!" shouted Sasuke, falling backward in shock as he broke the link. Having been staring right into Sasuke's eyes for the last minute, Chopper screamed as well, falling over backwards and scrambling away to safety. Naruto was with them both in a second. What the hell, man? What was that? Sasuke took a moment to calm down. I guess I learned two things, said Sasuke. First, Chopper, you've got wood element chakra, so congratulations on being one hell of a reindeer. Second, I think I just saw your devil fruit. He turned to Naruto, and I think it's just like a tiny version of the Kyuubi. Chapter 23. Toba's a good boy. Meanwhile, 10 kilometers above the Grand Line, Percival pulled at his whiskers as he considered the opponent that had slithered out of a shadowed corner of the dark and disused cabin. He was annoyed. Oh, not because he was in any danger from this foe, even though the snake that was currently uncoiling itself in front of him was wider around than he was tall. No, he was annoyed because the snake was so smug about his current prey's predicament that Percival couldn't help but cringe in sympathetic embarrassment. In his life, he had stared death in the face many times, but nothing made him more uncomfortable than being threatened by an amateur. His opponent tasted the air with its tongue. If it had been smarter, it might have wondered why the mouse it had found seemed irritated, at best. Alas, evolution hadn't given the snake that good sense. Hungry for a snack, it lunged, and Percival leapt over the strike, slamming his tiny mouse feet into the serpent's skull. There was a crack, then a thump, and then he dragged the snake's body away before dumping it unceremoniously out of a nearby gun port. The corpse fell away unnoticed into the soft white clouds below the ship. Percival shook his head. Hell of a place he'd ended up in. Stuck way up high in a bunch of clouds that were too dumb to know how to act properly, hiding in a ship filled with dangerous criminals. He'd been dodging traps that had been set in completely empty rooms for no apparent reason other than paranoia. To make matters worse, someone had filled the ship with snakes. None of the snakes he'd met were a threat, of course, but ever since he'd eaten the vermin fruit, model mouse, he'd felt a strong dislike for the scaly things. That was the third one he'd had to dispose of. Hopefully, someone wasn't keeping too close account of these things. If only his portable Den Mushi weren't completely out of range of the nearest repeater he could have reported in, but instead he was on his own. He would have to be very careful. Someone on this ship wanted the text of the poneglyph, and discovering the identity of this unknown party trumped any other orders he had been given. Having a known criminal who could read the things was bad enough, but having an unknown group with the same capabilities, no, it wouldn't do. Skittering quietly through the deeper parts of the ship, he dodged traps and snakes alike until he heard quick fragments of voices in argument as the two enemy agents he had followed reunited with their compatriots. He needed to get closer to hear that conversation. Most zone-type fruit users relied mostly upon their hybrid forms, a beast state that merged the best qualities of human and animal, granting incredible physical abilities. He, however, found his fully transformed animal form to be most useful of all. People used the phrase, quiet as a mouse, but a normal mouse had nothing on him. Sensing another snake slithering about in the unused room ahead, Percival moved up the walls. Using his abnormal strength to grip with his claws, he slid in between the gaps and seams of the planks themselves until he was crawling invisibly along the ceiling. Nothing at all sensed him as he slipped through the doorway. He moved into a tight hallway, hearing an odd noise becoming audible over the murmur of voices and gentle groaning of the ship. It was a sharp, almost electrical sound, and it was repeating itself every few seconds. Percival turned his wide, round ears back and forth, tilting them up and down, and determined it was coming from a nearby cabin. Curious, he crawled across the ceiling and slipped in through a crack above the door. Inside, the room was well lit by the light of numerous ghostly bluish-white flames that flickered without a candle, lantern, or bulb. The lights seemed to be stuck to the walls, burning without spreading or consuming the wood. They provided uniform lighting to an operating table that was being busily worked over by a deathly pale man with long, black hair that fell past his shoulders. There was something very wrong with this man. Never before upon seeing a person had Percival been filled with more revulsion. That was before he even got a good look at what was on the table itself. A yellow-haired man, stripped bare from the waist up, was set upon the table, his body propped up awkwardly by a circular golden apparatus that jutted from his back. The man was dead. Or, he should have been. He definitely should be dead. His chest was opened up, his rib cage pried apart by a wicked-looking wooden tool until his heart was exposed. The strange shocking noise he had been hearing was the man's heart convulsing every couple of seconds as an electrical pulse that seemed to come from nowhere at all forced the organ to continue beating. Wires and tubes led from the man's head and body to strange devices surrounded by stranger lettering and mystic circles. The repulsive, pale man stood above his prisoner, muttering, examining, and tracing invisible lines down the other's body. Percival left the room, disgusted. This wasn't his mission, no matter how unsavory it seemed. He moved back down the hall, checking room after room. Eventually, the indistinct voices grew louder. He was getting close. Passing through a sleeping cabin that hadn't housed anyone in some time, he found himself inside a storeroom filled with crates and barrels. The voices were right above him, and there was faint light sneaking through cracks and tiny holes in the ceiling. Poking his head through, he could see the room above him. He listened. In the well-lit room above, Toby sat at what served as the official Akatsuki dining room table eating a late lunch while reading the newspaper that Deidara had recovered. Several of the Akatsuki members had gathered when Toby had called for a meeting. The meal was fish broth noodle soup made by Kisame, who had slowly emerged as the best cook and fisherman in the group. Slowly, Toby remembered that the others were staring at him. That's right. He'd been so engrossed by what he was reading that he'd forgotten he'd been in the middle of a conversation. Deidara and Hidan had just returned from the ground below, but what exactly had they been talking about? So, Hidan, said Toby around a bite of noodles, remind me again why you jumped all the way down off the clouds. A wordless scream of rage filled the room. Toby didn't react to this outburst except to stuff another bite of his meal into his mouth. He watched, unmasked, with an innocently curious expression that showed the warped and twisted flesh of the left side of his face and the two Rinnegan in his eyes. Screw you, you ungrateful ass! Shouted Hidan. You throw me off a cloud and tell me to go after that goddamn stone and you don't even remember it. Do you even know what I had to go through down there? What the hell did I do to you, huh? Tell me. Toby looked shocked, surprise and indignation filling his overly expressive face. Oh, you helped with the stone tablet. Geez, all you had to say was that you wanted to help Deidara. You don't have to bite my head off. Hidan's death grip on the table in front of him tore a thick chunk of oak from the surface. With another roar, he chucked the weighty piece of debris straight at Akatsuki's leader. It got to within a few inches of Toba's face before his Rinnegan flared with power. The projectile stopped in midair, vibrated for a moment, then shot back at Hidan at 3 times the speed he had thrown it. Struck square in the chest, Hidan shot out of the room like a rocket, crashing onto the deck and skipping over the side of the bulwarks out into the liquid cloud below. Toby looked around the room in confusion. His childlike eyes met those of Deidara, Kisame, and Danzo, who were watching with something like impatience. All of the other members of Akatsuki were quite aware of Toba's overwhelming power, but Hidan seemed to need a reminder from time to time. Why was he so angry? Toby asked. He broke the dining room table. Don't waste any time on that foul-mouthed brute, growled Danzo. Did you find what we need or not? Yeah, agreed Deidara. I need one hell of a shower to get this crap out of my hair, but I'm not leaving until you tell me whether my trip down there was worth a damn. You'll have to tell me what happened to you both, chuckled Kisame. It sounds like the natives were quite spirited. No, I really don't have to tell you anything, Deidara responded, then pointed at Toby, and you, stop eating for one damn second and answer the question, Toby, already having forgotten about the earlier altercation, slurped down the last of the soup and considered the question carefully. Kinda, he said. I will not settle for a, maybe, Toby, said Danzo. We still have much to learn about the divine tree if we're going to fulfill our objective. Toby looked sheepish for a moment. Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly related. Deidara closed his eyes and rested his head in both palms. But I wouldn't say it wasn't interesting. It was talking about some ancient superweapon called Poseidon that supposedly has the power to sink entire islands and control the forces of the sea itself. The room was silent for a moment. Danzo rubbed his scarred chin thoughtfully, then asked, and you now know where this is located. That weapon would be an interesting backup plan if we can't get what we came for. Yeah, it's supposedly located below the Red Line mountain range. It had directions for where it is and everything. And look, he cried, pointing to his newspaper with glee, according to this, that's right where we're heading. Interesting, mused Danzo. Would this, Poseidon, be some kind of machine, or ancient jutsu, then? Well, it's really pretty vague, but I kind of got the feeling the superweapon might be, like, an advanced bloodline or something. Something that's passed down through some kind of mermaid. More silence. Carefully, Kisame spoke up next. Mermaid. What is that supposed to be? Deidara laughed, perking up right away. Oh, that's great. Our resident freaky fish guy doesn't know what a mermaid is. When Kisame shook his head, Deidara continued. It's a legend about a beautiful woman who's got the lower half of a fish. You know, your perfect dream girl. Kisame frowned, his beady fish eyes drilling a hole into the blonde Akatsuki demolitions expert. Bemusedly, he stretched his imagination to dream up what such a woman might look like. Eventually, his scowl deepened. That sounds disgusting. Hey, well, there's no accounting for taste, but you might have to learn to settle, man. Lower your standards a bit. You're not exactly a looker yourself, you know. Deidara laughed raucously. Unless you're looking for the other way around, fish head and lady body. Neither of those things sound particularly appealing. Toby piped up. I'm cheering for you, Sharky. One day you'll find someone. I know it. Danzo grit his teeth at this frivolous banter, but someone else beat him to the punch. A gruff, rumbling voice emitted from one of the speaking tubes nearby. The repairs to the ship are completed, said Sasori, speaking from the helm. The navigation device has set, and we appear to be over our target. We are ready to depart, so I suggest we stop wasting our time here. Don't make me wait. Now, Danzo added his opinion. I've already talked to some of the inhabitants of this sky island, and they are willing to help us return to the surface safely as well as finance our expedition out of gratitude for our actions. I agree that there's nothing left for us up here. Yes, that sounds like a good idea, said Toby. Well, I mean, if we're all ready. Kakuzu is bringing along a whole bunch of gold from the airship. I think he's upset about losing those hearts to that lightning guy. When he's done, I'm ready to leave. It was a fun adventure, but no one up here knows about any more of those stone tablets, so we're done. This concludes Sky Island Mission Meeting number 7. Good job, everyone. The few members scattered, leaving Toby alone. Well, not exactly alone. There was someone else here that he wanted to talk to. The rest of Akatsuki were wonderful friends, but they were a tough group to open up to, and sometimes he just needed to vent a bit. Standing up, Toby paused for a moment, then melted into the wood of the deck, startling a very concerned mouse who had been on the ceiling of the room below. As he passed through the deck, moving into the wood like it was a part of himself, Toba's hand slid down and snatched the tiny rodent before dropping to the floor. The mouse struggled briefly, startled by the sudden movement, before Toby spoke. Hey, hey, hold on, little guy. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm a friend. I just want to talk, okay? Slowly, the mouse stopped struggling. One of the lesser-known benefits of the Rinnegan was the ability to speak to and understand all manner of animals. The mouse gave him an odd glance, then said, squeak. Huh, quote, squeak. Toby was baffled. Wow, that's really funny. I can talk to all sorts of animals, but for some reason it just sounds like you're saying, squeak. Like you're just a guy pretending to make funny mouse noises. I've never heard that before. Are you all right, little guy? The mouse stared back at him, still trapped in his hand. A moment passed, then it spoke in a high-pitched voice that he could actually understand. That's my name. Squeak. Well, hello there, Squeak. I'm Toby. Sorry for surprising you like that, but I could use a chance to talk with someone, and the snakes aren't very good conversationalists. Toby walked over and gently placed the mouse down on top of a nearby crate that smelled like weapon oil. Then, Toby leaned over conspiratorially and whispered, besides, Orochimaru watches all the snakes around here and I think they tell him everything they hear. Huh, is that so? Said Squeak carefully. I didn't know that. I kicked a few of their asses when they tried to mess with me. I hope he won't be angry with me for it. Toby laughed, his amusement displayed clearly on his face. Wow, you're kind of a badass, aren't you, Squeak? That's okay, I'll cover for you. Thanks a lot, pal, said Squeak, clearly warming up to him right away. That's a big help. I hate snakes, ya know. So, you said you wanted to talk about something. This is why Toby loved animals. So easy to talk to. Yeah, I mean, it's just the usual, I guess. You know how it is, leading a group of people with wildly different personalities, where each one of them has their own goals, and they're all pretty good at killing people. Squeak slowly nodded his head and began pacing on top of the crate, his tiny claws making little ticking noises each step he took. Surprisingly, I do know how it is, yes. You've gotta make sure all their goals coincide with yours. Exactly. But the problem is that we don't know even the slightest thing about the world out here, which makes it tough to know what to tell them. So you're from an out-of-contact island, huh? What about lying to them? You know, promise them something they wouldn't get. Toby gasped, his mouth making a round O shape. Bringing them all out here on a lie would be wrong. Squeak stopped his pacing for a moment. Right. And you wouldn't want to do that. Toba's a good boy. Yeah, of course, said Squeak. But your plans seem so important. Whatever it is that you're reading on those stones of yours that you were talking about up there. That is you, right? The one who's reading them. Toby waggled his eyebrows, pride filling his expression. Well, that's a secret. You can't get me to talk about that. And don't ask me about what's in them either. Well, alright then, what do you want to talk about? Sometimes it's just nice to sort of be able to speak to someone else, you know. Just get the thoughts out there and hear how they sound. By all means, go ahead. The two of them talked. Toby had a laundry list of general complaints, but Squeak seemed especially curious about things like where they had come from, as well as how ninja worked in general. 10 minutes later, Orochimaru peered through the door, spattered with blood, causing Squeak to bristle in surprise. Orochimaru just stared impassively at the two of them for a moment, man and mouse standing alone in the dusty room. Were you talking to that mouse just now? He asked. No, said Toby. Squeak, said Squeak. Yeah, he's not. That mouse, geez. His name is Squeak. Quote. I see, replied the ship's doctor. The fact that the mouse had just clearly said the word squeak in a scratchy, high-pitched voice hardly even qualified as an unusual occurrence around Toby at this point, so he decided to ignore it. Well, the experiment was a partial success. We can preserve the fruit's strength until it is needed, though I'm hoping for better results next time. However, I've noticed a few snakes missing. Oh, I'm sorry, that was me. They were bothering Mr. Squeak here, so I had to remove them. I hope that's not a problem. Toby turned to the mouse on top of the crate and gave him a tremendously exaggerated wink. He was using the wrong eyeball, so it was still clearly visible to the man in the doorway. Orochimaru shook his head and walked out the door. After a moment, Squeak spoke again. That was Orochimaru. Huh. What's his experiment he was talking about? Oh, it's so incredibly amazing. Orochimaru's really super smart, you know. See, when it comes to our grand plan, we've got a backup, just in case. 'Cause one of the things we're looking for. It takes a long time to get ready, and if it's not ready when we get there, then we'll need to feed it so it gets ready right away. Sorry if this is kind of complicated. I'm trying to speak so a mouse can understand, but no need to worry. I'm a genius among my kind. Please continue. Okay. But really there's not much to it, and I'm already bored. Back to what we were talking about. Like, this problem I'm having with Danzo. They talked and talked. Eventually it was time for Akatsuki to set sail, and Toby decided that Squeak should be set free to enjoy his life in the sky. It would be sad, but his new friend deserved to live someplace wonderful. He sent him off among the clouds with tears in his eyes. Percival sprung back onto the ship when it was time to leave, of course. This time he kept to the depths of the ship, not wanting to be discovered again. He wasn't about to miss his only ride home. When they finally reached the ground, he would sneak off and make some very important calls to some very important people. Hours later, when the ship had landed safely on the ocean below and then made landfall at a nearby island, Percival slipped away. His exit did not go unnoticed. By sheer coincidence, the ship's security systems had been disabled during repairs and it had only been re-enabled once they were about to land back on the ocean below. When Percival left, a single invisible thread attached to the gun port he had used to make his escape twinged an almost imperceptible amount. By his position at the helm, Sasori of the Red Sands opened his eyes. There had been an intruder on board.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.